Chapter 15 now began for Catherine what she would always remember as two of the happiest years of her life. The discipline of the Whitman home had become well established, and life moved in a smooth pattern of home, school, and church, all under the same roof. Andrew Rogers, the teacher who replaced Mr. Hinman, was as different from him as day from night. Tall, fair, and good-looking, he had smiling blue eyes and a humorous mouth. In no time he had won the children's confidence and admiration. Mother was specially pleased because he had a fine voice and played the violin well. He took over the singing class and organized the children into a choir for church and for entertaining guests. Many travelers came through Wailupu that fall. After supper, Mother would line up her stairway of children with tall Perrin at one end and tiny Henrietta at the other. To the accompaniment of Mr. Rogers' violin, they sang in full harmony, delighting themselves and enchanting listeners. Henrietta, though not yet 2 years old, could already carry a tune, and when visitors made a big fuss over her, Catherine was as proud as if she had been her mother. If Father and Mother worried about the Indians, they kept it to themselves. As far as the children were concerned, especially the girls, Indians were only part of the background of their lives, seen but not felt. Now and then, however, they sprang a surprise. The Indians were in the habit of bringing their corn and wheat to Father's gristmill to be ground into meal and flour, and Father treated them as he would have anyone else, first come, first served. One busy morning, however, Tamahas, one of the chiefs, demanded service at once without waiting his turn. When Father would not let him have his way, he became very angry and stormed off, threatening revenge. At dinner time, Father and the miller stopped the machinery and came to the house. In the middle of the meal, a terrible racket sounded from the mill, as if it were falling apart. The miller jumped up and ran out with Father right behind him, and the children trailing after. As they reached the mill, Tamahas stepped out and knocked the miller flat, then dashed toward Father. Before he could reach him, another chief, Tewilkikit, one who was one of Father's friends, appeared suddenly and grabbed Tamahas around the waist. The man raged and fought, but Tewilkikit was stronger. In Indian, he said to Tamahas, "I'll let you go if you promise to leave and make no more trouble." Tamahas sullenly agreed, mounted his horse, and rode away. Father and the miller found that he had filled the hopper with sticks, which had made the noise when he started the machinery. When the family returned, Mother rushed, weeping, into Father's arms. He patted her shoulder. "It was nothing, my dear, nothing at all." "That Tamahas, I'm afraid of him." "The Wilkikit can handle him," Father replied. More children were added to the family this fall when Cyrus Walker and Eliza Spaulding came to spend the winter and go to school. Mary Johnson, from one of the immigrant families, was also eager for education, so she joined the Whitman clan, working from her room and board and schooling. She seemed like an older sister to the Sager girls, and they grew very fond of her. With a family like this, something was always happening that scared Mother half to death, she said. There was, for instance, the Monday morning when some of the dirty clothes had not been brought downstairs, and she gave Helen Marr a candle to light her way up to look for them. Helen returned with a few clothes, but no candle. "Did you blow it out?" Mother asked. "No, I stuck it in that keg of black sand at the head of the boy's bed, and I am going back to look for the rest of the washing." Mr. Rogers took the stairs three at a jump, while Mother stood frozen and pale until he brought back the candle. Only then did the children learn that the black sand they had uncovered and been playing with was gunpowder. All in all, however, the winter passed pleasantly with everyone well and not even much sickness among the Indians. The weather was so mild that as early as February, the trees began to put out their new leaves. Father had given Perrin, John, and Frank horses of their own, and often on Saturday afternoons of spring, they brought them up for the girls to ride. Sometimes Mother rode with them. John carried her old side saddle from the barn, and she put on the gray pongee riding habit in which, she told the girls, she had ridden all the way across the plains in 1836, just 10 years ago. She began to teach the children botany, and one more day she suggested a picnic so that they could gather wildflowers to mount and classify. She packed the lunch and her good blue and white dishes in a small cart Frank had made. She rode horseback with Henrietta in front of her while the rest walked. By now, Catherine's leg had improved so much that she could easily keep up with the others. They wandered up Mill Creek, so named for Father's mill, until they came to a pleasant place with trees and grass, where they spread the lunch. When Elizabeth's plate was empty, she turned it over and spelled out a name on the back. Spode. What does that mean, Mother? It is the name of the company in England that made these dishes. Our dishes came from England? Yes, they did. Of course, we bought them in Vancouver at the Hudson's Bay Company store, but they bring everything from England. I should think you would have bought 10 dishes on a picnic, Elizabeth said. I want you children to get accustomed to nice things and to handling them carefully. After the meal, they put the dishes in the cart and started home. On the way, Elizabeth and Helen noticed a wasp's nest, and when the girls made a game of throwing clods at it, the wasps swarmed out to attack their human enemies. Helen was stung on one knee, and Frank, who was pulling the cart, on his face and hands. Instinctively, he began to run, and as the cart bumped clumsily over the rough trail, 2 of the lovely Spode plates were tossed out and broken. Worse than that, the wasps attacked Mother's horse, making it rear and plunge until she and Henrietta were almost thrown off. When they reached home, she called the children together. Who threw the clods? She demanded. Elizabeth hung her head, and Helen spoke up bravely. Elizabeth and I did, but I threw first. Up to bed and no supper, Mother commanded, pointing sternly toward the stairs. Oh, now, Mother, Father broke in. They meant no harm. We can buy more plates. Mother's cheeks grew red. You leave the disciplining to me, and then you upset it. Suddenly she laughed. Oh, well, I should have taken 10 plates. The children tried not to smile, but they knew Father found them amusing and adored him for it. When school ended and the Spauldings came to take Eliza home, Mother decided she and the girls would go a few miles with them and camp overnight. Frank drove the ox cart with David for male companionship. 6 or 7 miles up the river, they came to a beautiful spot beside the swift-flowing Walla Walla River, where the trees and blooming wildflowers made a real garden. After the Spauldings had gone on, the children waited in the river while Mother cooked supper. They ate around the campfire with much laughter and singing, then rolled up their blankets for the night. The next morning, the oxen were gone, and Frank and Dave set out to find them, while the girls settled down for another day of fun. By noon, however, their food was gone, and they were hungry. Let's catch some fish, Elizabeth said. I see plenty of them in the river. But we haven't any hooks or lines, Catherine replied. Just then, a band of Indians, mostly boys they knew, came along the trail, laughing and joking among themselves. They called out to the girls, who waved at them, and the idea of fishing was forgotten by all but Elizabeth, who left the others and walked by herself along the river. She could see beautiful salmon swimming in the clear water and longed for a hook and line. Suddenly, she spied a big fish caught between 2 rocks at the edge of a pool and instantly pounced on it. Slippery and wiggling, it was almost more than she could lift, but she held on to it, wrapping her soaking dress around it. Elizabeth was just turning back toward the camp when from nowhere a hand came down over her shoulder and snatched away the fish. She looked up to see an Indian boy grinning as he held the salmon above her head. That's my fish. You give it back, she shouted. For answer, he raised it higher, but the leader of the band, a Delaware Indian named Tom Hill, who had recently appeared among Cayuse, spoke sternly to the boy, who looked ashamed and gave back the fish. The Indians went on their way, and the girls and Mother had a salmon feast before the boys returned with the oxen. Father laughed when he heard about the fish episode. That Tom Hill has become an important man among our Indians. He lived with the Nez Perces for several years, I hear. Kept telling them how the white men had driven his tribe out of their homes and would do it here, too. He's right, of course. That's why I want so much to help them learn to farm, for the days will come when their hunting grounds will be gone. He speaks English very well, Mother said. Yes, he has been well educated. If I could make friends with him, he would be a big help to me. The Indians seem to set great store by what he says. The summer of 1846 passed quickly and uneventfully. By that fall, Mr. Rogers decided to study for the ministry and gave up teaching, asking to remain as a boarder. Although the children all felt sad to lose him, the new teacher, William Geiger, was a fine young man from Mother's own hometown and church. Eliza Spaulding came back to school bringing her little brother Henry, who was only 6 years old. Mother was not pleased to have so young a child added to her family, but she could not refuse her friends, the Spauldings. Now the family, who sat down for meals 3 times a day, numbered 18, in addition to frequent guests: explorers, scientists, military men, or adventurers. Mother was indeed fortunate to have Mary Johnson to help her with the cooking. To all the guests, Father remarked how very peaceable the Indians seemed this year. They are beginning to find out how much better they can live by doing a little farming, he explained, but Catherine overheard him say to Mother, "I feel terribly discouraged. Mama says the Indians want us to leave. Where could we go, Ruckus? There is talk that the Methodists want to sell their station at the Dalles. We could live and farm there as well as here. Many of the immigrants now go straight across country to that point anyhow. It is too late to go this fall. Wagons will soon be coming. Yes, of course. We can't move this year, but I am thinking of next year." Catherine wondered if they really were going to move, but Father did not mention it again. He was soon occupied with packing supplies over to the Umatilla for the incoming immigrants, who brought the glad news that the government had made a treaty with Great Britain, setting the Canadian border at the 49th parallel. "One of my dreams has come true. The Oregon country now belongs to the United States," he told the children. "Where is Oregon?" Catherine asked. "Papa said we were going there." "What we usually mean by the word Oregon is the Willamette Valley," Father explained. "What the treaty calls Oregon country is all the territory north of California and west of the Rocky Mountains." "It must be a big country," Catherine remarked. "It certainly is. Someday I suppose it will be cut up into states." Catherine did not hear talk of moving to a place called the Dalles again until spring. The annual mission meeting was to be held at Shimikin this year, and Mother said she could not take the whole family because the Ells and Walkers didn't have enough room. Only Catherine, who, she decided, needed a rest for her constant care of Henrietta, was allowed to go. The main subject was the Methodist property at the Dalles. "I think we ought to buy it and set up a new mission," Mr. Spaulding said. "Who would take charge of it?" Mr. Walker looked at Father. "Why not you, Dr. Whitman, now that the Cayuse have become threatening?" Catherine expected Father to agree, since he had said almost the same thing at home. To her surprise, he reversed his stand, declaring he was not going to leave Waiilupu, the place he had worked so hard to build. Let Mr. Walker move. At this, Mrs. Walker glowered. Though women were not permitted to speak in the meeting, she made it plain that she was not about to be torn from her home either. Mrs. Walker had strong opinions, and all men knew it, so they hurriedly agreed to send Father, who lived nearest, to arrange for buying the property. They could decide later who would live there, yet they all seemed upset and apprehensive about the future of the whole Oregon mission. Catherine worried a lot about it. Had Father and Mother been keeping something from her and the other children? Did they really expect trouble? But once she was home again, absorbed in the calm, peaceful routine, she forgot all about the problems raised at the meeting. When school closed in the spring, Mr. Geiger set off for the valley, and Eliza and Henry Spaulding went home. This year, John went with them to work for Mr. Spaulding for the summer, his first job at man's wages. Mother sent Henry Johnson too because Mrs. Spaulding's health was poor and she needed help. The family would certainly have seemed greatly reduced if it had not happened that Mr. Manson, a trader for the Hudson Bay Company, brought his 2 lively sons to Waiilupu, asking Mother to keep them for a year. Father bounced back from his spell of depression and announced that he had definitely made up his mind not to leave Waiilupu. Instead, he was going to hire men to live at the sawmill next winter and get out timber to build a new house for Mother. They would sit farther back from the river, a little way up the hillside. Striding up and down the sitting room, he declared, "Someday there will be a city here, with schools, an academy, perhaps a college. This valley has a great future, and I want to be a part of it." Visitors were not unusual. The man who rode up from the valley one day was a never before seen near, an artist. His name was John Mick Stanley. He had been employed by the Smithsonian Institution to make a pictorial record of people and places in the West. He was a wonderful guest, laughing and joking with the children and entertaining Mother with the latest news. They were sorry he could only stay one night, but he promised to come back later. Maybe paint your pictures, he said, winking at the girls. Soon another artist appeared, a Canadian named Paul Kane. His ambition was to paint portraits of Indians. Father looked dubious. They did not like that sort of thing. They had a different idea from ours about pictures. Painting them might lead to trouble. Unknown to Father, Mr. Kane persuaded Frank to take him to the Indian lodges, and at Chief Tukulakat's home he managed to sketch the Indians without being observed. When he went to the lodge of Chief Tamahas, however, he was not so lucky. He pretended to be interested in the furnishings of the teepee, but all the time he was drawing the features of the chief. Frank, who reported the incident to his brother and sisters, grinned as he remembered the rage of Tamahas when he saw what the artist was doing. I think he would have killed Mr. Kane if I hadn't helped him escape. But Frank, won't Tamahas be angry with you for doing that? Elizabeth asked. But Frank just shrugged. Mr. Kane proudly showed Father and Mother the sketches. That Tamahas is the most savage-looking man I've ever seen, he said. I'm so glad I got these drawings. Now I can reproduce them with paints. Mother and Father said no more, but Catherine knew they did not approve of what he was doing. Refusing to take their warning, Mr. Kane, the very next day, when an Indian woman came to see Mother, drew her picture on his sketch pad and held it up for her to see. She screamed and tried to snatch it from him. When she could not, she began to weep and wring her hands. With surprise written on his face, the artist asked, "What is the matter? What is she crying about?" Mother said soberly, "She says if you keep the picture, it means you have her soul in your power." Oh, gosh. Mother talked quietly to the woman, and finally she went away. But that was not the end of the artist's mischief. Mother had set the children the job of raking the yard, and Mr. Kane went out to watch them. When they saw he was drawing their pictures, Matilda, in a playful mood, upended her rake and tried to balance it on one finger. Mr. Kane quickly sketched her in this pose before Mother appeared at the door, the familiar red spots of annoyance in her cheeks. "Matilda, stop that nonsense and get to work. I don't want a picture of you acting so foolish." Mr. Kane only laughed and slipped the picture into his portfolio. Catherine did not tell Mother he had sketched her and Father also when they were not looking. She and her sister thought it a great joke. She seemed glad to bid goodbye to Mr. Kane. After he had gone, she said to Frank, "Don't ever take anyone else to the Indians' lodges." "Why not? They know we are friends." Mother looked off into the distance. "I hope what you have done will not bring danger to you, Frank. The Indians are different from us. Just be careful, that's all I ask."